Welcome back to Exceptional Undergrads, a podcast where we interview successful college students and explore how they achieved such successes at a young age. Be sure to check out our show notes at exceptionalundergrads.com for all resources mentioned in today's episode. Today, I welcome Graham Wesel to the show. Graham is a current junior at High Point University. He's very active on campus, holding many leadership roles, along with the wealth of professional experience he has, having worked at internships at Liberty Mutual and Carolina Acquisition Partners. He's also an upcoming finance intern for Wells Fargo. Graham provides a fun approach to leadership, learning, and growth, and I really enjoyed our conversation together. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Graham Wesel. Today I've got with me Graham Wesel. Graham, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're on. Would you like to start us off and tell us about some recent accomplishments and who you are?
So obviously my name is Graham Wesel. I'm from Concord, Massachusetts. It's a small town outside of Boston, and I grew up with two other brothers. I'm the middle of three brothers. One's a freshman here at High Point. I'm a junior, and then my older brother, he's 24, working out in San Francisco for Google. And just growing up, we've always been a competitive group. You know how boys are. Just always, whether that's sports, school, everything else, it's always some friendly competition. And then right now, I'm obviously a student here at High Point. I'm a finance major with a minor in data analytics. I'm on the student advisory board for the Phillips School of Business, vice president of finance for the Professional Selling Club, portfolio risk manager for the Floyd T. Craven Investment Club, and then I'm also the co-president for the Men's Lacrosse Club here on campus. And then outside of school, I'm also working as a financial analyst intern at a local private equity firm called Carolina Acquisition Partners.
It's quite the involvement on campus that you've got going on.
I mean, it doesn't allow for a lot of sleep, but I like it. It keeps me busy. I'd rather be busy than sitting twiddling my thumbs. So
I like it. You also write this article/newsletter every week called Business Minds. I love that, how you're interviewing a bunch of people as well. I want to hear about how this started up, because you're doing it for around 6 months or so.
Yeah, we hit the 6-month mark about 3 weeks ago, which I genuinely didn't even know I could hit. I was just doing it because I enjoyed doing it. So this past summer, my sophomore summer, between my sophomore and junior year, I worked at Liberty Mutual Insurance back home in Boston. And as an underwriter, I was working in the Freedom Captive Group, which was in the middle market construction division. And so what a captive group is, it's different than traditional insurance. It's a conglomerate of organizations that come together and make a loss fund. So let's say you and I are in a part of the loss fund, and you go and rear end someone. From the pot, you would pull the money to go pay that claim. But let's say that we don't have any claims. We as Liberty Mutual would reinvest those premiums into offshore bonds, and then you get money paid back on your insurance policy. So it's kind of like a incentive to not have any claims. So when I was working for them, the first thing on my desk one morning was a fatality claim. Someone was driving the wrong way on the highway and hit the back end of one of our front loaders. And I said to myself, I really just don't want that to be a part of my life, a part of my corporate life. I don't know how you feel about that, but like first thing in the morning, I'm like, that's just not what I want to deal with. And so I kind of reevaluated what I wanted to go into. I really enjoyed underwriting, the dual aspect in nature of the back end data analytics and producing numbers, and then also sharing those numbers with coworkers, clients, and brokers. And so I said, what other fields have that duality of both number crunching and personability? And so I looked at it and I found finance. And so I said, okay, there's a lot of different factors or sectors within finance as a whole. So I said, Mom and Dad, do you guys have anybody that I can talk to or reach out to just to see if I can learn more just about the field in general? And my dad said, oh yeah, you can talk to one of my buddies. And so that kind of started what was Business Minds, in that I interview industry professionals to learn about their career and their insights and anything else that they really want to share. And I always ask a question at the end of every interview, which is, if I wanted to continue the conversation about X, whatever we're talking about, is there anybody else that you think would be interested in contributing to this project or continuing this conversation? And they say, you know what? Yeah, I actually have a buddy that works for whatever, and I think they'd be happy to. I said, oh, okay. Do you want to send like a warm email over? Oh, absolutely. Because if you're, what I've learned from this, I know it's a long-winded answer, but I know that people want a give and take. You can't just go in and say, hey, can you connect me with someone? You have to offer something of value. So who wouldn't want an article written about them? And so that's kind of how I've been able to not only learn more about the finance industry, but also gain connections within the finance industry. And so I've been able to, over the last 6+ odd months, interview kids who have just graduated High Point, going into their full-time roles, all the way up to the former CIO and executive VP of JP Morgan. And I actually, on Friday, I talked with Marilyn Sherman, who's one of our in-residents here at High Point, who's like the professional speaking in-resident. I talked with her for 45 minutes, and it was an amazing conversation. And so I've just been doing that, and it's yielded a lot of really cool answers because I kind of ask similar questions in every interview, but the answers just vary differently. So that's what Business Minds is in a nutshell. But yeah.
I find that so inspiring, really just taking the initiative
Mm-hmm.
to go out and go after trying to speak to who you want to speak to,
Mm-hmm.
especially to gain that wealth of knowledge from people who are already in the industry. Is there any lesson or any person that really stood out to you from the people that you've interviewed over the past 6 months or so?
Gosh, I mean, all of them really. But if I had to pick one, it was one of my dad's friends' connection. So we've gotten like 4 layers deep thus far. And so since I made that transition of going from my business administration and sales and creative writing to finance and data analytics, I've been set on trying to get into the investment banking world. And this one guy who has been on the board of, like, name a company, he's probably been on the board of it. He's a partner in a private equity firm now, and he's done a lot over his career. He said, out of college, you shouldn't go into investment banking. Try consulting, because if you go into investment banking, they just teach you how to be really good with Excel, and anyone can get really good with Excel. But with consulting, you can not only get good at Excel, but build your personal skills and have a well-rounded, brand for yourself. And so I kind of thought about it. I was like, that's just never occurred to me to do that. So I'm starting to look into more consulting roles, just as we start applying for full-time roles. So that's probably who I would say has been a notable guest.
You mentioned something right there beforehand. Whenever you said that you switched from like business administration, sales, and then creative writing.
Yes.
At the end, the creative writing end, I want to get into that because I know that you're writing your own book.
I am.
But I had no idea that was it a creative writing minor?
It was a creative writing minor. Yeah.
How did you go into that specifically because of you writing your book, or was this something that you just happened to stumble upon?
Yeah. So taking it all the way back to 4th grade, I've always just loved writing. If I get into a book, I'm getting into a book and no one else can talk to me type deal. And so back in my school, we entered like a national competition for writing. It was around Halloween time, and we entered a competition to write these spooky short stories. And so I wrote mine, just about how these 3 kids were going out on a trick or treat, and a bunch of different things happened. And I submitted it, and I got top 12 in the competition. I said, okay, I guess I'm pretty good at this. And then I got some awards at my school for it during graduation and things like that. And I've always just loved creative writing. I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm a very technically sound person, but just having that outlet of creativity, I don't know what it is. It just pulls me in. And so I've just continued to write, whether that's poetry, short stories, obviously the Business Minds. That's why I like writing it as well. It's just always been a passion of mine. So when I got to college, I was like, okay, I started writing the book senior year of high school, and I'll get into more about that in a second here. But when I got to college, I was like, okay, I want to pursue this more so, but I also want to pursue my business degree. So that's why I started business administration with a creative writing minor. And then now, since I've taken a couple creative writing classes, and I feel like I've gotten a solid enough base where I can fully transition into my finance degree and my finance future aspirations.
I took a creative writing class in high school.
Yeah.
I thought that it was really odd at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I really liked it, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that I myself have always enjoyed. I've
Mm-hmm.
always been good at writing. I haven't been as good at speaking. Had to work a lot more on my speaking and public speaking rather
Mm-hmm.
than writing, but I'd always grind out essays like the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really good at that, and I could randomly pull together symbolism and stuff that
Yeah.
was going on, just kind of make it up. And
Uh-huh.
as I started to become more creative and allow stuff
Mm-hmm.
through either meditation or just journaling and
Yeah.
things like that, because there's ways like that you can unlock a bunch of
Oh,
creativity.
absolutely.
It's insane. If you look into how to unlock creativity, it can be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I've turned into a little bit of that, specifically through meditation, which has been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with creative writing, it's one of those things that if you just give yourself no boundaries and just sort of write
Just
about
run with
whatever,
it.
that's how I'd write a bunch of my essays. And that's how I ended up writing like 80,000 words or so of a book of my own, which is
Wow.
eventually going to get published.
That's crazy.
But
Good for you.
it's not out yet. But it was actually the original thing behind this podcast,
Really?
which was able to now form into this. But I still have all the stuff,
Mhm.
which is cool.
Yeah.
But I noticed for me, if I just write and don't even bother to look at any of the different stuff and just sort of just basically spit
let it
out
flow.
whatever's on my mind, I can get almost like some stuff together, and then it's sort of just reshaping it and forming it into stuff. But I want to hear more about your process of writing a book,
Yeah.
about what the book's about. If you can tell us about
Yeah.
it. I know you've been working on it, you said, since senior year of high school.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm a technical person at heart, and so I'm very meticulous with the work that I put out. And so during high school, I worked at a local just Italian restaurant in downtown Concord, and I was a busser. And I got really close with one of the chefs that worked there, and it turned out that he was an orphan, got involved with a gang, and unfortunately went to jail. And so I'm writing about his life, what he went through, and how he got out of it. But it's not a biography. It's a biography with my creative spin on it. So it's like a fictional book based on true events type deal. And so my senior year of high school, he was still incarcerated, so we could only communicate via letters. And so I'd write him a letter asking him some questions, and he'd write 5 or 6 pages of a letter back. And I wrote like the first 30 pages or so, and I kept getting letters, and I told myself, if I want this to be as authentic as it should be and as authentic as I want it to be, then I just got to scrap it. So I was like, okay, cool, scrap. And then same thing happened. I wrote 30, 40 more pages and kept getting letters, and now I was able to call him and stuff like that, and same thing happened. So I said, okay, all right, you got to scrap it again. So I've scrapped probably 80 to 100 pages of work. And so this past summer, so June of 2023, he's fully released, and he's doing great right now. But me and my family drive to Florida from Boston every summer. So I was able to call him for 5-6 hours a day when we took the 2-3 days to drive down. So that was like the base knowledge note-taking for the book, for the authenticity that I was looking for. And so I'm at 100 and something pages. Obviously, just with everything I'm involved in on campus, like I mentioned before, it's kind of hard to balance it. But if I find time, I really enjoy just sitting down and just being with myself. And I know you asked about the process. The process for me is, so I interview him, whatever comes to topic we talk about, I take notes. And then I kind of go through a multi-layer process. So that's step 1. Step 2 is I have a journal that I write out the chapters in. So obviously he tells it to me in chronological order, and I write it down in chronological order, adding my little creative tweaks here and there. Maybe I change the timeline where we're in one when he's older and then when he's younger, whatever. And so then I take that book that I just wrote everything down in, and then I go to my computer and I write, because then as I get into it, you get more and more creative, because it just, as you said before, you can just get into something and write 80,000 words about it. And so what happens is I get into it and I see the creative marks that I wrote down. It's like, oh, I want to add about this, or I want to take this in a completely different direction. And so it's allowed for some really cool stuff, and I'm really looking forward to put it out there when it's done.
I just enjoy hearing stories nowadays. Some of my favorite nonfiction books feature stories in there that are usually true, or sometimes even ones that are made up. I feel like those really hit home to put certain points in perspective. And I think learning how to tell stories has been something that really
Absolutely.
can impact the way that you communicate and articulate different things in your life. And I think having the passion for writing that you have has definitely made you be able to think differently and give yourself different perspectives. Because if you're writing about things, especially in a fiction book like you're doing, where it's based off of true things, but then you're also putting in your little spin, you're able to tweak your mind into different perspectives. And I think that that's something that definitely most likely helps you whenever you're going into different settings all the time, being heads of different clubs where you're at, whatever it is, the finance club or the investment club, and then you're also going and playing lacrosse. I think that's a very interesting point, that whenever you put it together, I feel like that could be very helpful.
And it's not only just going into like small groups. It's also, because I do a lot of speaking for the school, whether that's back at home, because we're really good friends with the recruiter for our area. So I'll go and speak for them all the time, or I speak here at school, or I introduce speakers and things like that. It really allows me to connect with the audience, because if I was sitting in those seats, what would I want to hear and what would bore me? And I even when I'm writing, like, I ask myself simple questions. If the character's walking down the street in not a nice neighborhood, what would you see? Okay, you might see some cracks in the sidewalk. Where do those cracks come from? What do they represent? Things like that. So it's just a rabbit hole of, as I'm going down one right now, it's just a rabbit hole of different things that I don't know, connect your audience to your passion. And I'm rambling. That just means I'm passionate about it. But yeah. And so, kind of going back to the public speaking bit, that's kind of how I got my job at Liberty Mutual this past summer. So I guess I was able to connect with the audience at that time. So.
Do you have any tips specifically for public speaking? I know that you mentioned that you are speaking for the School of Business here, and then you also are speaking back home, which I feel like that's really cool to be able to not only speak on campus for your role in the student, what was it? The student
Student advisory board.
Student advisory board. There we go. To speak from the student advisory board for the School of Business as well, but then to also speak back home. I think that's a really cool thing. So do you have any tips for us for public speaking?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, I just think the audience is just people. It's not anything different than you raising your hand in the middle of class and asking a question. You're just asking a 5 to 10 minute question to your audience. And so I feel like a lot of people overhype when you're getting up and talking in front of a group of people. I mean, obviously it just comes with experience about what you're talking about, or how many repetitions you've got. And I've talked a lot about that with Marilyn Sherman, the public speaking professional. But at least for me, it just comes down to thinking with common sense. I know it sounds very, not necessarily vague, but very simple, but it's true. Like this past summer, I spoke at one of the recruiting events, and I don't know, there's probably 300 to 500 people there, and I was able to engage with them, ask them questions, and I mean, at least for me, it wasn't any big thing, just because I knew I was in their shoes of deciding whether to come to High Point or not, and I knew what I wanted to hear and what sort of questions I would be asking and things like that. And so, for public speaking, just think with common sense. It's just people. They're your friends one way or another. You're going to meet them either before or after. And yeah, it's simple.
Just putting yourself in the audience shoes.
Yeah.
And thinking about what they would want to hear.
Yeah.
And then just articulating that in a way that they can understand it.
Because I know at least we've been in the audience in front of speakers before, and what does that feel like? Okay, you're just watching them and they're just talking. It's just like what we're doing right now. Like you're just watching me talk. It's just instead of one person, it's over 1,000 people. But yeah,
I mean, you never know. Like 1,000 people could be watching this right now.
Right?
Let's hope so. All right, let's take it back a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm really inspired by a bunch of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you did mention at one point taking it back to 4th grade. I don't
Yeah.
think we need to go all the way back to 4th grade. But I want to dive into who you were back in high school. Because I know people make miraculous changes in their life. I know I have from the freshman year of college up to now, my junior year. But let's take it back a little bit. I want to ask you more about who you were maybe senior year, freshman year of college or so. What was your mindset at that time, and what were some of the art activities that you were participating in?
So my junior and senior year, I was obviously involved in a lot just because of my competitive nature. And so during one time, I was on 2 different lacrosse teams. I was on our high school's varsity golf team. I was coaching a youth basketball team. I was working at the restaurant. I was studying for my SAT. I was doing outside of school, like weightlifting and training with a trainer. All on top of doing my regular schoolwork. And so what I came to find is that I had a big problem with saying yes to people. I was always the person who wanted to go either help someone or get involved in a project or things of that nature. And then it came to that point and I just couldn't balance it all. So I had to take a step back, reevaluate it, get second, third hand opinions, which I feel like a lot of people don't do. They just try and deal with it internally and make do with what happens. But I'm someone who likes to articulate what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, whatever. And so I was able to talk with my parents about it, and we came to a conclusion and knocked some stuff out of my schedule, and it worked out. And so what I do now is I have a calendar on my phone, my computer, and a notebook that I carry around everywhere in my backpack. And so when an opportunity arises, I say, okay, let me check my schedule first before I can commit to anything, because I don't want to repeat what happened in my junior and senior year of high school. And I feel like it's just added another layer of professionalism to my personal brand, because before I was overcommitting and not being able to give my 100% at each step or each group I was involved with. Whereas now I'm still involved in a lot, but I'm still able to give 100% effort to whatever project I'm working on at that time.
How did you learn to ask for help from people? That's something that I struggle with sometimes, is articulating to other people what I'm going through. I like to bottle stuff up, and I know that's a lot of people like to do that, because it's hard to ask someone and get a second opinion on certain things, second or third, as you said. How did you learn how to ask for help?
It just runs in the family. My mom grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, where there's a 2-lane dirt road, and if you had something to say, you said it. And so she kind of brought that over to our family. And my dad actually complains at the dinner table a lot. He says, I can't get a word in at all. And it's just, Dad, you've been in the family for over 30 years. You should probably know by now that you just got to speak up and keep talking until everybody else stops talking, so then they can start listening to you, because you're the only one still talking. And so that's kind of where I got it from. It's just me and my family. But it's just people, I feel like, try and put up an image of what they want other people to see. And I mean, okay, cool, you're more than welcome to do that, but it's not who you truly are. So with that, they don't know what you're going through, and it's hard to articulate sometimes that what you are going through to other people. So I think just being able to be vulnerable, and I know that's tough, be vulnerable with someone, whether that's good friend, family member, whatever, but they'll also reciprocate that. They'll be able to trust you more. So it's, as I said before, it's a give and take.
Then how do you prioritize your tasks now? Because it's one thing to just throw things into the calendar, but you can like you said, in high school, where you had so much stuff going on, and then you just said, yeah, and then I just kind of took some of the stuff out. How did you learn how to prioritize the tasks that you have so that you can be doing more of the high leverage activities or things that you really find valuable?
That's a good question. So at least today, so in school, in my notebook, I write down, okay, this class, this assignment, that class, that assignment. And then out of school, I say, okay, I got to interview this person for Business Minds, or I got to submit this application there. And so I say, okay, well, back up. Before every semester, I write out my schedule for each day during the week. Like Monday, I have class from here to here. What am I doing between classes? I'm coming home, maybe taking a 10-minute nap or whatever, then getting work done or things to that effect. And then I also write out goals for each semester, 7 to 10 goals, whatever. And everyone says, oh yeah, write down your goals. Goals are great. And don't get me wrong, they are, but you need to make them actionable. So what I do is I write down those goals, and then I write down steps on how I can go about achieving those goals. So for example, I want to keep the GPA that I have now. And so with that being said, I wrote down, find blocks of time that you block out to just study, develop new studying techniques that you may have not done before via watching videos, other people, whatever. And then using your notebook to stay on top of your assignments. So it's just something simple as that, because you can do that every day. Like another example for my book, I want to try and get it published this year. Taking time, I said, take 15 minutes out of your day, every day, to just sit down and work towards your book, because everyone's got 15 minutes in their day somewhere at some time. So it's just small things like that to allow me to prioritize what I need to do, if that all makes sense.
I got it. I think one thing, I have a couple of things that you just
Go
said.
for it.
The first one is a study hack that I tried and it's been working really well for me. There's this chart. It's like I want to pull it up and show you the thing. It's called the learning pyramid. Have you looked at this at all?
I've probably seen it before, but I don't remember what its contents are.
Okay, it looks like this. I published it in one of the blogs that I have about John Maxwell. I'll flash the thing up on the screen. So it looks like that. The bottom one it basically goes from the lowest amount of retention and then all the way down to the bottom, which has the most retention, which I think it's like teaching other people stuff. That one's the bottom?
That's the bottom one.
Yes, it is. Here's this. I'll flash up an actual thing so you can see it. But this learning period, the last one, it goes from like hearing stuff in a lecture all the way down to teaching others. And teaching others is 90% of getting your basically 90% knowledge retention rate. So what I tried to do, and I noticed has worked really well for me, is to go to a classroom and basically fake give a presentation where I'm teaching all the stuff that I have to know.
That's cool.
So I'll learn like whatever the thing is. Say it's this semester macroeconomics is one of my classes. So I'll go through, learn the stuff that I need to and take notes on it. And then I'll fake teach the notes like I'm teaching a class on the stuff and explain it out to people and be like, all right, whiteboard on the board, and be like, all right, guys. Maybe not all right, guys, because no one's there. But I'll be like, all right. And I'll actually say the stuff out loud. Like, if you're walking past, like, it probably looks like I'm absolutely insane. But, I mean, I'm the one scoring higher on the test. So I don't know what to tell you. But it's like going through and basically being like, all right, you know, this is supply, this is demand. Like, this is how everything moves. And I just actually say the stuff out loud, and I'm teaching it. And then I noticed that I'm able to recall the information better. I don't know if it's like a crazy hack or whatnot, but I think that's something that I feel like you should try that.
That's really cool.
As another study technique.
That's really cool. Because, I mean, people come to me and ask me questions, and when there's a question about the stuff that I taught, I was like, oh, yeah, I talked to that person. I said this. Oh, okay. So obviously I don't go to the extent that you are, but I'll try it for my next test. But that's cool. I haven't heard that before.
I don't do it for everything. I actually did that one time for not even a class at all. I just thought I like to look into things now. And one of the things that I want to understand is our brains, so like neuroscience stuff. I nearly failed classes in high school for science. Somehow I always said that it was my favorite subject. And then I just would go out and like not do well at all. So I don't know if that was arrogant of me for not studying, but it was It was interesting, but now I wanted to look into it. So I looked up, and I don't know if people don't know this or not, which I recently found out, but you can look up on YouTube just like neuroscience lecture or like just random lectures, and they just have college
That's
level
cool.
university lectures. So I found an entire thing from some school, and I went through one of the
Like
videos.
classes.
Like the class, like I was just sitting here watching it, which honestly was better than sitting in a normal class because I could pause the video and take notes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's a huge way of learning that I really have started to enjoy. Went through, took all the notes, and then like fake taught it, and I can still remember all the stuff
That's so
right
cool.
now. All the different stuff about like dendrites, neurons, things like that, and all the different parts of it. I literally never heard of any of this stuff before. I mean, like a very basic knowledge, but I actually learned it, and now I can actually speak on it. Like if I needed to give a presentation on that right now, I probably could.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So I'd look into that studying hack. The second one that I was going to ask was, how do you plan out your days now? Because I go to the gym at like 5 a.m, but you meet me there every single day. So that means you're waking up earlier, most likely, than I am. Why are you waking up so much earlier? Like, what's your reasoning behind this, and how does the rest of the day fall out?
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll just give you my Monday schedule because Monday's tomorrow.
Let's hear it.
So for just a regular Monday, I get up at 4:30. I shower. I don't brush my teeth, change, whatever. Get to the gym by 4:50 to 4:53, and then I work out until 6:15 or 6:20. Go home, get ready for the day, and then come back for breakfast at 7. Then I have a class at 7:50 to 9 o'clock. I come back 9:15 to 10:25. I answer emails, do homework, just getting all the miscellaneous stuff out of the way. Go to class from 10:40 to 11:50, have a quick lunch, and then I'm working at the private equity firm from 1 to 5. Come back, have a snack, whatever. And then I have lacrosse from 6:30 to 8, and then I eat dinner from, 8:22 to 9 o'clock, and then I try and get in bed by like 9:15, 9:20, and do it all again.
Wow. I know you're talking about you're involved in a lot of stuff, but that's quite the...
And that's just one day.
Exactly.
And then it's like that every day of the week.
Would you say that you have gotten into like a pretty good routine there?
Yeah. And it helped that I visually wrote out my time blocks. Like what I told you at the beginning of every semester, I write out my daily schedule for each day of the week. Being able to, and I print it out and I have it right next to my door in my room. So every day before I leave, I can glance at that to see what I have upcoming if it's not already in my brain. And then I also have like my goal list with the actual steps that I was talking about earlier. If you're in my room, they're one on top of the other right next to my door. So I always look at it before I'm leaving to go somewhere. I'm like, okay, I got to go do this today. And then I forgot about it or that, whatever. So being able to visually see what it is that you're doing, I think is helpful to me, or it has been helpful to me.
Do you keep a calendar version or something like that on your phone where it's all connected to things so that you can see? Exactly
for the most part, I keep the more like important stuff on my calendar. So obviously like my classes, when I have meetings with people, things like that, or interviews, and then when I have work. Those are the things that I keep on my calendar. But like I said, the time 9:15 to 10:25, that's not in my calendar. It's just a blank spot in my calendar that I have for work or emails or anything of the like. So.
What was the original motivation for getting up at 4:30? Was it just to be able to work out? Because I feel like for myself, sometimes for the most part, I'm usually up like 4:45, 5-ish. And I got moved back from 5:30, which is what it used to be for a while.
Same.
But I'm about to switch it up again and probably go to like 4:30. I like experimenting with a lot of stuff, especially my routines, to try and find exactly what's going to work for me. And then I sit on something and then I want to try something eventually. I just like experimenting with stuff. It's really cool. But I noticed for myself, it gives me a period of time where I can kind of be by myself and work on something that's really important to me. Is that the time whenever you're sitting down and writing part of your book or working on other stuff besides going and lifting, or are you doing that more towards the end of the day, or is it literally just random?
So going back to this summer, I was obviously working for Liberty Mutual, but I was also coaching a club lacrosse team that I coached the summer before. And we have practice every night of the week for age ranges 3rd grade to 11th grade. And so I would have to go immediately from working in Boston to wherever the practice was, outside, like 20, 30 minutes outside of Boston. But I had to go from my office, go on a couple train rides back to where my car is, and then drive to practice. So I'd have to wear my button-down shirt, pants, and nice shoes, and change in the car in the parking lot for practice, and go out and coach for 4 or 5 hours every day. And so I would get home at 9:30 and eat dinner and go to bed. So I had to, if I wanted to go to the gym, I would just have to go in the morning. And so I carried over that routine, and now I'm here. And as I said before, that was my schedule for the day. So it's like the only time I can go to the gym. So, I mean, I love it, but it's just become a part of my routine just because it has been. And I honestly like it better. So
You have certain blocks in your day
mm-hmm.
that are outside of, obviously working or
Mm-hmm.
going to the gym and whatnot. There's like small periods of time where you're gonna have to be able to study for
Mm-hmm.
school because you have a bunch of stuff going on that like barely talks about classes.
Yeah.
Do you have any hacks for people or tips
Mm-hmm.
to really get them to zone in and focus on their work and be more
Mm-hmm.
productive?
I mean, at least for me, I like studying in my room. I don't know if other people like studying in the library or whatever, but I mean, I just take my phone and throw it on the bed under my pillow so I don't even see it. Uh, and so it just disconnects me from whatever distractions that might be Instagram Reels or Snapchat or whatever, because everyone can get distracted on those. And then if I'm studying for a test, as I said, I'm a visual person. So I take the notes and the lectures and I write out like a study guide of all the information. And then I go through it, and whatever things I remember or don't remember, I write the whole thing out probably 2 or 3 times before a test. And then someone's like, oh, hey, what have you been doing to study? And I said, I have this. We can walk through it. And so that's when I teach the content. And so that's when it gets fully reinforced. And it's been working thus far. So putting away distractions and having some sort of visual aid via just writing out the notes in different colors, but depending on whether it's like a definition or a section and stuff like that. So
I definitely need to try that because I started. Sometimes I just don't even take notes in classes, and I've started taking more notes now, of course, and then so I can teach myself some of the stuff or fake teach people, I guess, so I can go off of it. But I think. Do you think that the colors of your notes do you have any sort of system with that, or are you just kind of randomly taking notes?
So I have like for chapter headers, for me it's red, just like in big red letters, chapter 1, whatever. And then next is blue, which are like section headers, or actually purple. It depends on like whatever I'm feeling, but I keep the same 3 colors, like purple, red, and blue. So, as I said, red's like the overall section header, chapter 1. Purple is like the subset. So let's say it's, I don't know, sales strategies. So it'll be sales strategies, and then 1, 2, 3, whatever in that list. But if there's a definition, in blue, I write out the word, like, I don't know, CRM, whatever. And then I write the definition. So then if I'm looking through it, like right before the test or something, I can go, oh, I know it's from whatever chapter. I'm looking for a specific definition. So I can just look, and it's different than the black writing that I write out. I do it all on my iPad. It's different than the black writing I do on my iPad. So I just see, oh, CRM right there. What is it? Okay, boom. Close the book. I'm ready. And it's worked for me. So
Nice. I definitely want to try that. I want to shift back to some more of the professional stuff. So you were able to score a bunch of different internships. Obviously, to do this, you got to go there and sit through a bunch of interviews and I'm sure apply to a bunch of things. First, let's start off before we get to some more of the interview stuff. What would you say would be the most important thing for people to do if they want to score internships like you have? Specifically big ones like this.
So assuming that you get past the initial screening of your resume and they want to do an interview with you, try and figure out who you're going to be interviewing with, because again, you want to be in a situation where you know the other side of the table, whether that, as we talked about before, with business minds, the give and take, or public speaking, the give and take, and having those different perspectives. I'm going to be working for Wells Fargo this summer in Charlotte, and so for that interview, I was able to get the name of the guy that I was going to be interviewing with. So I researched him, I looked him up on LinkedIn, and I try and look for connections between him and I, or whoever I'm going to be speaking with, because obviously it's something that you can talk about if you have some sort of connection. Or if for some reason there's no connections, like we didn't go to the same school or we didn't get involved in the same things, I asked something that I don't know about. So I said, "Oh, you're from California. What's it like out there?" And obviously they probably loved California or they hated California, so it could go both ways and they could talk about it. And then you can ask follow-up questions, or it leads to something else. Or so when I did my Wells Fargo interview, we just chatted for probably the first 15, 20 minutes. And it also just settles you into the interview because you're laughing, you're talking. It's not like you're giving your robotic 2-minute drill to the interviewer, stuff like that. And so what ended up happening, he's like, we've been talking for 20 minutes and I haven't even asked you a question yet. I have actually questions that I need to ask you for the interview. And I was like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. So being able to find who you're interviewing with is huge.
I had on Amanda Malgeri here.
Okay.
One of her things that she insisted upon was however long you expect the interview to be, spend that same amount of time or more preparing for the interview. Is there anything that you do beforehand, whether that's preparing for the same amount of time or whatnot, like she said, or do you have how do you prepare for some of these interviews going into it?
So at least here at High Point in one of our BizCom classes, we were creating answers for very simple, basic interview questions like, oh, when's a time when you worked with a difficult team member, or when is a time that you did X project, whatever. And so I create a new document and I copy and paste those answers that I have pre-written there just so I have them. And then based on research that I've done just about the company, I'm going to pose some random questions that I think that they're going to ask. And so I take bullet points. I don't write out sentences because then you're just going to be reading from the script. Excuse me. But so the bullet points don't allow you to read, they allow you to think. And so I put the question in bold, underline, it's like, what made you want to get into finance? Just random question. And then I do a bullet point, because this happened at Liberty, and then because of business minds, and then what I want to leave them with and how I can bring it back to why I'm interviewing with them. And so having that done beforehand, it just again visually, I'm able to see it in my head and just call upon it. And as I said before as well, when talking with someone or giving a public speech, it's the same thing. It's just you asking a 5 to 10 minute long question. So I just do a lot of research. I put answers and potential questions that could be asked, and the research that I do about the person, I put that at the top, and what sort of questions I could ask them about that, and then what sort of things I can connect to that. It seems to work out. So
how do you think conducting interviews for your business minds has helped you in the interview process as the one being interviewed?
Immensely. Because as we talked before, knowing the other side of the table is huge. Because I don't know if you've done the presidential scholars interviews as well, being on the other side of it, it's a completely different feeling because you're the one asking the questions and you don't have to give any sort of answers. And so being able to know the other side and know that they're just another person. It's just you're having a conversation and they just want to get to know more about you. And just being able to do the business minds thing for 6+ months now, it's just helped me immensely, not only critically think while in an interview or be able to propose a succinct question or succinct answers. Really, is really helped me, and it's because of the repetition and because of the practice that it's helped.
All right, let's take it a step further back.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get that first internship that you had? And how do you think your approach into the first one switched up whenever you went to other ones in the future?
So in business minds, I've actually talked to a person about this, about the cyclical dilemma that goes on with students and trying to get internships, because companies expect you to have experience in order to get an internship. But in order to get experience, you need to have an internship. So it's this never ending cycle of you need something, you need the same thing to get the same thing that you're looking for, if that makes sense. And so that happened to me my freshman year, my freshman summer. I didn't have an internship. So when I went back home, I thought to myself, I'm not just going to sit around. What can I do to stay busy? What can I do to try and better myself in one way or another? And so that summer I worked 4 different jobs. I was a lacrosse coach for my high school, or like my old high school. I was a lacrosse coach for a club travel team. I worked at a local restaurant, and I had my own lacrosse business. And so I'm a face-off guy, so I don't know if you know lacrosse, but in hockey, when they drop the puck and they fight for it, that's basically what I do, but for lacrosse. And it's a very individualized and technically sound position. So I said, okay, when I go home, I can start a business about that and see what happens, because it's an untapped market. I did some market research about it, whatever. I did a bunch of marketing for it, sent out a bunch of emails to every coach in the area, put up flyers in all the shops in my town, the surrounding towns, everything. The first night, no one showed up. Second night, no one showed up. Second week, third week, no one showed up to either session. And it just goes to show that you're going to put effort in, but it's the real world. No one's going to give you anything just because you put effort in. And so what I learned from that is to be confident in who you are, because at some point someone will take you for who you are. And so that leads to me speaking at a High Point event back home. And then that's where I met the global head recruiter for Liberty Mutual, because her daughter just happened to be going into High Point that year. And so I took the initiative to go around and talk to all the prospective families, just seeing if they had any questions. And I ran into her and she said, do you have a job? Are you looking for a job? I said, yeah, I'm looking for a job. And this was March before the summer of my sophomore year. And so I'd been looking for a job. I probably had 90 positions I applied to on an Excel spreadsheet. I still have it on my computer that I could show you later. But so that's how I got the first one, just because of a referral. And so I was able to gain experience with that, and then Liberty led into business minds, things like that. And so this time around, I wanted to start the job search early, like wicked early, because I knew freshman year, I was like, okay, I'll start when the career fair comes around in October, and that didn't help. I started right when the school year started for sophomore year, and that really didn't help either, because I applied to everywhere, and the only reason I got a job because I spoke at that event. And so this year I started, even before school started, I started applying, beginning of August, I started applying. And then I met up with one of my buddies who was also trying to go into the same field, and we would meet, twice a week. We'd send out applications, give each other homework and to apply or reach out to someone at a company. And then we'd come back and keep working on it. And that's kind of how I got the offer to go at Wells Fargo. And once we get into an interview, we talked about what kind of stuff to do in an interview. And so that was really advantageous to me. And that also worked for the private equity firm that I'm working at now. And so it's got a proven track record.
How do you think that accountability with your friend has helped you guys grow together?
Absolutely, immensely. I feel like, at least for college students, they think that they're so busy because they have class and they have clubs and things to do, that they can't sit down, or they don't have time, 30 minutes in your day, to go and send applications to different companies. And so having the accountability that you need to go and meet with someone to send out those applications, to look over your cover letter, your resume, things like that. Or, oh crap, I said I was going to submit 3 applications before our next meeting, but I haven't done it. I got to go do that now. And so having the accountability of not just on yourself, but the accountability of being with another person, I think it helped immensely. And I think everybody who's applying or trying to achieve some sort of goal, to have another person to share, not necessarily share accountability, but hold yourself accountable for their sake, if that makes sense. So
I feel like having an accountability partner can be like super helpful for you,
absolutely,
because it's one of those things where you're developing and keeping trust with them. Because if you aren't holding, who are you to hold them accountable if you don't do the stuff yourself?
Exactly.
So it really puts another layer of trust between you guys.
Exactly.
To make sure that you not only trust yourself to do the work, but trust yourself to do the work, so then you can hold the other person accountable.
Exactly. And I remember the night that I applied to the position at Wells Fargo. So on Tuesdays we have sales club until 8. And so I went home and grabbed food and I ran over to his place so we could send some applications out. We were probably doing it for like an hour and a half. We were scrolling through different pages. I went on the Wells Fargo page and I applied to a couple ones. And then I saw the one, I'm going to be a finance intern. So it said early careers finance intern, Charlotte. And I was like, should I apply to this? He's like, yeah, dude, why not? Just throw it in there. I was like, all right, cool. We'll just see what happens. And it happened. So having that accountability partner to build trust, as you said, and to have that relationship is very advantageous and has been very, very helpful thus far. And we're meeting again to apply for full-time jobs. As I was saying before, we met earlier this morning to start applying for full-time jobs a year and a half out, just because we want to go into investment banking. So
outside of the accountability partner that you've got here, do you have any other mentors that have really shaped who you are today, and how did you go about finding them?
So I have a couple mentors, and in Business Minds, one of the people that I talked to, he said, you need to build a board of directors of mentors, because you can't just have someone from an older generation because they don't have a connection to the younger generation, and vice versa. And so I've been fortunate enough to have people in Business Minds be mentors to me, but there's 3 that really stick out. There's my dad, obviously, just because he was the first one in his family to go to full 4-year, to get a full college degree, but he did that via 10 years at night school, traveling for work 60% of the time, and just that whole deal. And he's gone on to do some amazing work, and he's been very candid about all the numbers, issues, everything that he's been doing. So I've been able to learn a lot from him. And then it's translated over to my brother, who's a part of my generation. He's 24 and I'm 21. So he knows what sort of process I'm going through right now and what sort of things that I should be doing, should not be doing, things like that. And then actually when I was working out early in the morning at the gym before we're going to Liberty Mutual, I met this guy who coincidentally worked for Wells Fargo. And so he's kind of been my financial mentor on how to get into the finance industry and things like that. So building a board of directors of mentors is huge.
My dad always tells me the board of mentors, or board of directors of mentors. There you go. He calls it just a mastermind group, essentially.
That's
another good way to say it. Of a lot of just having a bunch of people where you can almost bounce ideas off of specific people for specific stuff. So I'm trying to go about doing that. And I feel like doing a podcast like this where I just talk to a bunch of people all the time, that can help me out, because I've already met a bunch of people who I didn't know, who I have formed connections with.
Exactly.
Which is great.
And I'm doing the same thing. Like, I'm reaching out to people that I've talked to, say, hey, this is my resume. Do you mind looking at it really quick? And they're like, oh yeah, I like it. Or this, and this. And then you can send it out. Like, okay, thanks. And so it's really cool to have that kind of connection, and I'm fortunate to have that. So
Do you have any books that you recommend, or books or podcasts or YouTube videos or whatnot, that you think were really inspirational for you that other people who are undergrads should read and definitely check out? Whether that's for any sort of specific skill or just in life in general.
Yeah, so as I said before, when I was trying to find a job and I was looking early, things like that, I was very fortunate to get lined up at Liberty Mutual. And so I would have a commute from my house outside of the city. I would have to go to the train station, take one train, take another train, and then walk to the office. And as I did that, I was looking up like how to get a job or job search tips, things like that. And I stumbled upon a podcast called the Dream Job System Podcast by Austin Belsack. I forget how to spell his last name. But he has short 10, 15-minute episodes about different topics about how to find your dream job. And so every morning when I was commuting to work, I listened to it. Or when I was commuting back to my car to commute to lacrosse, I would be listening to that as well. And what's really cool is I've been able to use those same tactics in the emails that I send, or use the same questions that he says to do in interviews for my Business Minds interviews. And it was probably one of the most influential podcasts that I've listened to.
Definitely going to check that out. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
All right, wrapping this up a little bit here. If you could go back to the first day of your freshman year of college and give that freshman year of college Graham some lessons, what would be one of the top 2 or 3 lessons and tips that you would give freshman year Graham?
First and foremost, everybody says this, but it's so true. Your network is your net worth. I know everybody says it, but it's so true. And I've been able to build my network just via Business Minds. I don't know, 60, 70 people that I've talked to already. Start connecting with people early, because the people that you go to college with, they're going to be out in the business world when you're out in the business world. And so if you have a connection with them, and let's say you're looking for a job, or they're working at a company that is a potential client and they already know you, that's so much easier to make that connection and do some sort of deal with them or work with them than it is to send them a cold email and say, hey, my name's Graham. I work for this company. Can we do business together? You got to keep that in mind. So that's one. Another one is in college, you have a lot more time than you think. At least in high school, you would go from class from, 8 to 3 every day for the most part. And then you'd go play your sport if you played a sport. And then you'd go home, shower, change, do homework, and go to bed. Here, it's 18, at least for me, it's 18 hours of class a week. And so you have so much time in between to work on yourself, whether that is doing your emails, doing your homework, doing outside of school projects like writing a book, writing Business Minds, things like that. And that all goes back to writing out your schedule that works best for you. And so when I was talking to one of the people for Business Minds, they said, you need to live your life in your own front row. Everybody has their own front row, whether that is the one standing up in front of the class giving those talks, or whether it's the person in the back quietly taking notes. Whatever your front row is to help you succeed is crucial to know what that is and how you can utilize that to get to where you want to be. So connections, time, and finding your front row.
Can you expand a little bit more on what you mean by front row?
Yeah. So everyone has their own tendencies, their own strengths, weaknesses, idiosyncrasies, things like that. And being able to not only find those, what they are, and then hone in on those things and knowing yourself to a T is so much more advantageous than saying, it's different than experimenting. Experimenting, you're trying something to see if it works. Not knowing yourself and doing something just to do it is pointless. So knowing yourself and acting on those things to your fullest potential, as I said before, whether that's up in the front of the class giving the talk or in the back of the class taking notes, being able to find what you're good at and exploring that and taking that on is how people should live in the front row.
So exploring and figuring out what your strengths are.
Correct.
And then exploiting those
Yes.
strengths. Awesome. I really like that. I appreciate you coming on.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add anything at the end here that I might have missed that you wanted to talk about?
I feel like in college, when people face a challenge, they get consumed by it, and or not even necessarily a challenge, just things that happen in life or things that you want to remember. It just gets bottled up within you. Going back to the creative writing or just creative works in general, I find it helpful to write things out. Like before bed, sometimes I am thinking about, oh, I have this the next day, or I need to do this by this date or whatever, and I can't sleep. So being able to write down those things that you need to remember, it helps me, because now it's on my phone. I don't need to remember it. It's not my problem anymore. I can go to bed. So being able to address things with more than just yourself, if that makes sense, being able to address things with that is been advantageous.
A self-reflection, and then almost taking the stuff out, so
Projecting it.
Look at, you said very visual, so almost like looking at what's going on from like a different perspective.
Correct.
I find that interesting. I do a lot of journaling myself. I journal in the morning, and then I journal at night. It's a little more structured than I guess I could switch it up at any point, but I've had it be super structured for a while. Not super structured, but fairly structured. It's a lot of gratitude journaling. But I do find that really interesting. I always write down to-do lists. I'd stopped for like a week or so. Now I'm back on that. I noticed myself, I mentioned this in another interview, I noticed myself almost, after I stopped, I was kind of lost in a way. And I hadn't felt that in a little while, and now I went back to it, and now I'm good. Yeah. I'm locked in again.
Good.
Which is good. Well, awesome. I appreciate you coming on today, Graham.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I had a fantastic time conversing about a lot of stuff. I feel like you brought some good perspective. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with this book, and I'm excited to read it because I love reading now. It'll be a good one for me to hit up in the fiction section. Maybe that'll be the first fiction book that I read in a few years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Exceptional Undergrads. If you found inspiration in today's episode, head on over to our website, exceptionalundergrads.com, for show notes and more resources. We're always looking for new undergrads to showcase on future episodes. If you'd like to be featured on the podcast, hit the Apply Here page on our website, fill out the applications, and we'll get back to you. And as always, stay exceptional.